Welcome, Monique Pariat, to the Sustainable Impact Hub here in Davos. We're here to talk about the humanitarian response. Monique, you are the Director General of the ECHO, the Humanitarian and Protection Civil Response of the European Commission. Welcome to our 360 VR conversation. So we wanted to talk about the partnering for impact, this aspect of collaboration in the humanitarian sector, and how do you see this evolving?
Thank you very much, Olivier, for inviting me to this discussion. In charge indeed of the humanitarian and civil protection operations for the European Commission, we are one of the major donors and worldwide, I would like to say. And if we add together with our member states, we are certainly the biggest donor worldwide for humanitarian aid relief. What I would like to say as some introduction is that we cannot continue to work as we have been working for maybe 40 years or so. So the world is changing, and we have to work differently. So the business as usual model does not really work any longer. So that's why is that? First of all, because we are intervening in more and more complex context, so more and more in conflict situation, conflicts involving different kind of actors, and in particular non-state actors that don't necessarily respect humanitarian, international humanitarian law. They are not binded by that. And we are also working more and more in context of protracted crisis, which means that people are displaced or are in humanitarian needs for very long periods, not for 6 months because there was a disaster and then once the situation is clean they can go back, but in situations where they are displaced in other part of their country or in other settings in other countries where they are refugees for 2, 3, 5, 7, 20, even more years. I think the average duration of displacement is 17 years. So it means we need to provide other response than just providing immediate humanitarian relief, providing a shelter, providing food, some healthcare and so on. So we need to address other needs. We need to provide more long-term responses, and we need also to work more collectively. And considering the increasing number of crises we have, and I think we have for the moment something around 145 million of people in humanitarian needs worldwide, which means that even if the needs are increasing, we are not increasing at the same speed as the needs. So we have to be more efficient to find new ways of working, to include another type of actors, to take more advantage of innovation also, of what new technologies can give us also, to design new forms of aid. So we'll come back on that, but cash is obviously another way to address needs in a more dignified way for the populations affected. And we need to take on board education needs. Education in emergencies is becoming a basic need for children that are displaced for long periods, and we cannot afford to have lost generations. So there are a number of issues that we need to address. We need to involve the private sector, because if we talk about having more digitalized or internet-based response, we need to have the private sector on board, which creates opportunities, but also a number of challenges when it comes to ensuring the protection of people that are in threat situations, maybe by their own governments or by other groups. So it's a number of challenges we need to address collectively: donors, humanitarian aid organizations, private sector, maybe potential other donors, and I would say also the beneficiaries, because we need also to let them more have a say of what are their real needs and how efficient we work with them.
Monique, you mentioned 140 million plus people affected by disaster, 20 years plus of the protected situation. I mean, for our audience worldwide, these are really staggering numbers. And in front of these needs, what do you see the actions that you could take to foster cross-sector collaboration to help move this humanitarian sector forward?
Well, I would like to take an example which is maybe more talking to everybody. You know, we usually provided support in kind for people in need, providing food. You can remember these bags of rice that we provided. It still exists, but we provide shelters, we provide, healthcare support. But more and more we see that, and in particular in protected situations, there are two things we need to combine. One is to respect the dignity of the people, so that they don't want to be assisted, having to queue for food, having to queue for medical packs, having to queue for whatever. So that's where this idea of having cash, multi-purpose cash support for refugees came into play. If you can give some sort of a financial package for refugee that will allow them to decide what they want to do with it. Is it to buy food? Is it to rent, apartment or shelter? Is it to go to the doctor? Is it to send their kids to school? Maybe a combination of that, but it leaves them the choice to decide what they do with it. Secondly, with cash, you can also contribute to the local communities, because don't forget, people that are displaced to communities, to other communities, to another area where there are people living there who may not see this arrival of people with, necessarily big welcoming support. So having those people contributing to develop the economic sector, because with this money they will buy their food or their services locally. So it contributes also to, let's say, approximate those two populations that live together, and to contribute also to some economic development also. Mm-hmm. So that's the second advantage of that. And thirdly, providing money costs less than providing support in kind very often. So that's on the efficiency thing. So if we have not enough money to cover so many crises, the more efficient we have and the more return we have on €1, $1 invested, that on those $100 that arrives to the beneficiary, we have less lost in the pipeline. Then it's more efficient, and we can reach out to more people and be more efficient. So just to say that this is an example. There are others that where we see we increase the dignity of the people, let them decide on their needs, contribute to reducing the misunderstanding or the buying of the local population of those people riding on the territory, and also develop possibly also livelihood possibilities, which is also very important.
Absolutely, and I want to rebound on this livelihood, because livelihood is about development. Yeah. And here in Davos, there's a lot of conversations around the nexus between humanitarian and development. How do you actually ensure that the needs of people are covered on a time scale that is evolving up to, as you say, more than 20 years, which is really a staggering number. So what are the opportunities you can see between these two sectors, the development and the humanitarian sector?
This is a very relevant question, and this is also why we need to change, because for years you had humanitarian community that was working on one side and the development on the other side. But I think we need to bridge that much more. Also, for the very reason that I mentioned at the beginning, if people are displaced for very long period, you cannot just, for years and years come back with the same solution that are purely emergency response. So that's where the nexus with the development aid makes its sense, because if I come back to the cash example again, if you develop a multi-purpose cash assistance program, it's at the end of the day a minimum social safety net that you give to a refugee population that can one day be integrated or develop into a government-owned system of social safety net. That can be aligned, if there is one existing, to the one that is offered to the citizen of the country in question, and will be enlarged to the refugee population. Or in some countries where there is no such social safety net existing, that can be turned into a national minimum income support that could be then covered and supported by development money and not humanitarian aid money, which would be dedicated to that in the first phase, but then could be taken over by more long-term development support, including budget support.
Very interesting. Now, Monique, we've been talking about the response to humanitarian situations. Can we now look at the preparedness aspect? How do you actually prevent emergencies and disasters to occur? And in your perspective, how could you see the power of innovation to increase this preparedness?
Preparedness is definitely vital, and there's something we need to do more on that. The problem is that often, the needs are so important when it comes to repairing that you don't have enough money left for the preparedness phase. But we know that if we invest more on preparation, we also reduce the need to you reduce the vulnerability, you reduce the number of casualties, and then you reduce the need to come with humanitarian aid relief afterwards. So we are working a lot on that, and I would also say that we often see that those complex situations, they often had a natural element trigger or national hazard trigger. The impact of climate change has consequences in terms of the fragility of states, in terms of movements of population, in terms of increasing poverty and the emergence of conflictual situations. So working more on that, anticipating it, is also a way to possibly prevent also, in a way, the exacerbation of conflictual situations. And it's also a way to reduce the vulnerability of people. If we do more early warning, and for that the question on using new technologies is very crucial. For instance, we see that in most of the disaster situation we are responding, in particular with our civil protection mechanism, the first thing that is requested is satellite mapping to see the level of the disaster, the impact, where roads are cut, or what's the situation exactly. And this is even something that the Americans ask us, and asked us for Hurricane Harvey and the Caribbean during the autumn. So satellite mapping is very important because you can have a first assessment of the situation, and you can avoid also going to places or targeting search and rescue in the wrong place. So that's an important element. Another element I would say is obviously the use of apps where you can also inform local populations very rapidly when the risk of floods or of a tsunami, and that's very important. So we can work more with local communities on that, so that they know where to go when there is a risk of a disaster, via also an early warning system. So there are a number of potential support that innovation can provide in working better on prevention. This goes also for the prevention of pandemic, where if we invest more on that with a stronger health system, and I come back to the previous point on the Nexus, if we build more resilient healthcare systems, then we have a better chance also to prevent outbreak of a pandemic. You can also have a better prevention of people towards also bad habits. If you have more resilient sanitation systems, you prevent also the outbreak of cholera in disaster situations. So there is a lot that can be done, and that's where we need to link our common competencies, and that's where you need the money of the donors. You need to have the expertise of the humanitarian aid organizations, and also they care about the respect of humanitarian principles. You need to get the private sector into it, because they have the innovation knowledge, they have the technology, and they also are able also to cope with the need to address protection issues in terms of hacking and cybersecurity. And we also need to have everyone on board so that we work more collectively to work more efficiently.
Monique, thank you very much for this inspiring deep dive into the humanitarian and response and preparedness. And thank you very much for your leadership. And the European Commission is a big supporter to the humanitarian response. Thank you very much. And for the audience,
thanks to you.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.